Well, thanks, Tim, and welcome everybody again. And again, it's a pleasure to again present here at Share Cafe. What I'd like to go through initially is a very short presentation deck. I know I've presented here, I think it was a month or so ago, so I'm not going to give a long presentation, but just give a short presentation, a little bit of background about ResApp, some background about the transaction, but really give the opportunity for you all to ask questions. We realize this is a time where there's a major change in ResApp, and we're very open to answering questions from shareholders. So next slide, please. And next again. So as a bit of a background about ResApp, for those who haven't heard the story before, ResApp uses sound to diagnose respiratory disease. So we spun out of the University of Queensland roughly 7 years ago now, based on technology developed by Professor Udantha Abaratne at the university. And his idea was, could we use cough sounds to look inside the lungs and diagnose different diseases such as pneumonia or asthma or COPD? His work was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And what the Gates Foundation were looking for was really a low-cost tool to diagnose pneumonia in the developing world. Pneumonia is one of the biggest killers of children under 5 in the developing world. About 1 million children every year die from pneumonia. And so that's where the initial technology came from. Since spinning the company out of the university, we've run numerous clinical trials, we've had peer-reviewed publications, we have regulatory approvals of our technology that just uses cough sounds to diagnose disease. It's really as simple as coughing close to a smartphone records that cough sounds. We then use artificial intelligence, or more correctly, machine learning technology, to analyze those cough sounds, look for signatures that are associated with different respiratory diseases, and provide a diagnosis. So we've done everything from pneumonia through asthma, through COPD, and just earlier this year in March, we released our preliminary results around COVID-19. And so again, we're able to use cough sounds to identify COVID-19 at a roughly 92% sensitivity and around 80% specificity. So this gives us a really strong option of taking to market a COVID-19 screening tool, which could have large implications or a large effect on the management of COVID-19 moving forward. So next slide, please. So when we released the COVID results earlier this year, we were also having discussions with Pfizer. Pfizer at that time then decided to make an offer for the company. They made an offer at 11.5 cents when our share price was roughly 9 cents. Since that time, we had an independent expert report come out. That draft independent expert report said that our share price was more fairly valued at a range of 14.6 to 27.7 cents, with a preferred value of 20.7 cents. And so based on that, the board went back and negotiated with Pfizer to get a higher offer. And just earlier this week, Pfizer submitted a revised offer that brought that range up into that independent expert range. And so right now, the revised deal structure is actually a 2-tiered price structure. So what we're doing at the moment is running a confirmatory data analysis study. So we've continued recruiting patients in our COVID-19 study since March. We now have a fairly substantial data set of roughly 300 positive patients and over 1,000 negative patients. We now will analyze that data. If that data performs within some agreed thresholds that we agreed with Pfizer, then Pfizer's offer will be at 20.7 cents. So that preferred value of the independent expert, and importantly, a 130% premium to the share price prior to us announcing this scheme. So 130% higher than that 9 cents to get up to the 20.7 cents. If, however, the data falls outside those thresholds, then Pfizer will raise their offer to 14.6, which, as you can see, is the lower bound of the independent expert report. But this also represents a 60% premium to the share price before we started. And, it's still a substantial increase over where we were before with the prior offer of 11.5 cents. So in general, what we've seen here is Pfizer, making a significant increase to the offer, and the board is very happy to recommend that to shareholders. Next slide, please. So as I just mentioned, the next steps in this deal are we're performing this confirmatory study, 1,300 participants. We're expecting those results in the next few days, and we're excited to see those results. Look, and I think it's important to realise that pilot study that we presented results in back in March was very encouraging. But it's also important to note that those results were cross-fold validation results, which means we were training and testing the algorithms on that data set. It wasn't a true prospective study, which is what we'll see with this confirmatory study. Now, we've always seen very consistent results moving from cross-fold validation into prospective studies, but we need to do that. It's the next step in the development of the technology. The next step for shareholders is that a scheme booklet, which will contain information relating to the scheme, including a copy of the full independent expert report, as well as the reasons for the board's recommendation, the risks that we see going forward, will all be sent out to shareholders in early to mid next month. And just, I guess, as a conclusion, we really recommending that to shareholders to vote in favour of the transaction in the absence of a superior proposal. So next slide, please. And I think Tim would happy to answer some of the many questions that are coming through already.
There are many questions, Tony, but firstly, congratulations. I mean, to have a company like Pfizer validate what you're doing for an Australian company is worthy of congratulations. So that shouldn't be missed out in terms of describing what's happened here. Now, can you? Why is this? There's a question here. Why is this a scheme of arrangement rather than a kind of off-market or simple takeover?
So a scheme of arrangement is typically, I guess, first of all, it's what Pfizer requested. That's what their offer was a scheme of arrangement. A scheme of arrangement gives the other party essentially certainty in the complete takeover of a company, and so their decision to do a scheme of arrangement was their decision, and as I understand it, the main benefit of that, it means you get you don't end up owning a part of the company, you end up owning the whole company, and that's effectively what they want to do.
And how did this kind of revised proposal come about?
So back a month or so ago, the board obviously received the first offer from Pfizer at 11.5 cents. We thought that was a significant premium to the share price back then, which was in the range of 8 to 9 cents. It had been that low for a significant amount of time, roughly a year or so. So we thought that was a good offer that we should take to shareholders and that we should recommend to shareholders, subject to an independent expert report. And that's customary in these sorts of deals that the board will recommend subject to an independent expert report. So we then commissioned the independent expert report. The independent expert report came back at a range that was quite a bit higher than that 11.5 cents. And I think from Pfizer's perspective and really from our perspective, we're a little bit surprised at that, given where we are in the development and the risks associated with, in particular, taking the COVID algorithm forward. And so, we went back and used that independent expert report to negotiate a better deal for our shareholders with Pfizer. And so that process was then, over the last few weeks, we've been negotiating with Pfizer to get a better deal for our shareholders. We now have what we believe is a great deal for our shareholders based on this tiered structure, and we'll bring that forward now.
And shareholders, of course, Tony, are never happy, even though you've improved the share price by 270%. Why the plan to sell to Pfizer, and what are Pfizer's plans for the product, if you can tell us that?
Yeah, so I think from why selling to Pfizer? I mean, effectively we're providing, we're recommending this offer because we think it is a good financial outcome for our shareholders. There are, it's a significant premium to where the shares are trading, 130% to where it was when we started. I think that it values the risk in the company. It values both the opportunity in COVID-19, and you'll see that in the independent expert report about the size of the opportunity for COVID-19. But it also takes into consideration the risk associated with taking this technology forward. There are regulatory hurdles, there are clinical hurdles, there are commercial hurdles, and then there's general market condition hurdles. So I think if you consider what ResApp would need to do standalone wise, the amount of capital we would need to raise and take this forward through all of those hurdles, versus an all cash offer from someone like Pfizer, in the next month. There is a financial incentive there. So that's really where our thinking was. What does Pfizer plan to do with the technology? Look, I think Pfizer has great resources to overcome many of those hurdles and get the products to market. They're the ones that would then take on the risk of doing so, while our shareholders would have a cash in their pockets effectively.
And there's questions here. There's lots of questions here. Is there a chance of competing bids?
Look, there's always a chance of competing bids. Obviously can't comment about any of the discussions that have been going on or are going on. But at this point in time, we don't have a competing bid in the process.
And was the kind of acceptance of the bid based on the fact you have a multinational like Pfizer coming in to be able to commercialize the product?
Look, I mean, I think from a product development and a technology perspective, someone like Pfizer offers the technology an opportunity to really get to market quickly, have the resources that's required to get it to market, and overcome those hurdles and reach the most people. So, look, I think from an altruistic angle, someone like Pfizer could help us get the technology into the most people's hands and have the a biggest impact on patients' lives. But I think the main reason the board looks at this is trying to provide shareholders with the best return financially, and the best risk-adjusted return as well. And I think that's important to note, that we take into account the risks of the company going forward versus the all-cash financial return in the short term.
And are you satisfied that the revised proposal is sufficient? And is it enough to win 75% of the voting majority at a scheme meeting?
Yeah, so look, I mean, the final vote is up to shareholders, and that's how this works. And the future of the company is essentially in the hands of shareholders, and that vote. Look, we think that we've worked very hard to negotiate a very strong and compelling deal from Pfizer. We strongly recommend that shareholders vote in favour of the scheme based on our knowledge of the risks going forward and knowledge of the offer. But again, this is a shareholder decision in the end, and it will come down to the shareholder vote.
And on that, what are the benefits of the transaction versus kind of the risks if the transaction doesn't proceed?
Yeah, so I guess the benefits, the big benefit of the transaction is, it's an all-cash offer from Pfizer, which would see a decent premium to where the share price was trading over the last 18 months. And so, that's the primary benefit for shareholders. The risks if the transaction doesn't proceed, well, I mean, I think, as I mentioned just before, we will probably need to raise a significant amount of capital to take this technology forward, to move through those hurdles. So whether they're additional clinical trials, whether they're regulatory barriers with FDA, whether they're commercial barriers of getting the technology out there. So there will be significant amount of spend and risk associated with going through that. I mean, I think and saying that we would need to raise a significant amount of capital in the current environment is also important to realise. The current environment is not friendly for capital raising, is not friendly for biotechs at the moment. So there is that pathway does have a fair bit of risk, and it's a risk reward balance that shareholders need to consider and work out which way they believe they should turn. And I think the board's recommendation looking at this is that that pro of getting immediate return for your cash is probably is a good option to consider at this point.
And so outside of this question here, Tony, outside of the Pfizer takeover, has there been any other developments or work progressing, licensing deals, submission for regulatory approval for COVID screening, etc.?
So as I said, the next step in COVID screening is this prospective study that we're running, with Pfizer, and these results and this confirmatory data readout. So that was the next plan for our COVID technology. We certainly didn't have data that we could submit for regulatory approval based on those March results that we released. So this is the next stage in the COVID development, was this data readout. The rest of the business is just moving on as normal. Our sleep check FDA submission, is expected, or I guess a decision is expected this month, which is what we've communicated to the market previously. We have other business development discussions in telehealth with ResApp DX. We obviously have revenue flowing from Allo Doctor, from Medgate, from our customers. So outside of the Pfizer acquisition, it's business as usual for the rest of the company.
And Tony, there's a lot more questions here. What I'll do is I'll end it here, and I'll forward those questions through to you, and we can manage it probably better that way.
Yep, absolutely.
So thanks for your time, and have a nice weekend. Congratulations on the Pfizer deal.
Great. Thanks, Tim.